Hi, this is Dave Chen from slashfilm.com.
And I'm Amy Nicholson, the chief film critic for the LA Weekly.
And we're here to talk about our interpretations of Synecdoche, New York, written and directed by Charlie Kaufman.
Synecdoche, New York started when Spike Jonze and Charlie Kaufman were asked by Amy Pascal, who had Sony, to write a horror film. And they went and thought about it for a year or two, so long that Spike Jonze lost the ability to even make the film because he was busy with Where the Wild Things Are. But this is what a horror film is to Charlie Kaufman. And you realize that to him, a horror film is basically the idea that life itself is passing through all of our fingers, including him. You can't help but see Charlie Kaufman in this film. It's a story about a guy who has been deemed as a genius, which Charlie Kaufman was straight away from the very beginning of his film career, when he was being John Malkovich, when he was doing Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and about what that pressure is. And then you look at that pressure and you're so fixated on it that everything around it can pass by your fingers. And it's just sort of this horror of what it's like to be him. And then extrapolating it into the idea of the horror of what it's like to be all of us, who are all in that same position all the time in ways that we don't even recognize. Right from the very beginning of the film, we subtly get the sense that everything in this world of Synecdoche, New York is not what it seems. The film starts with a radio announcer saying that it's the 22nd of September, which is the very first day of autumn, and that autumn is the beginning of the end. And he has a local poet on who reads this poem about death, and that's very hopeless. But she says that it's the truth. By the time Caden Cotard gets downstairs and grabs the newspaper, it's October 14th. And this is being shot like it's one day. But we're noticing that time is just passing by before he even notices it. When he's in the middle of the paper, it's all of a sudden October 17th. And then he gets up and he grabs the milk carton and he looks at it and he says the milk is expired. And we notice that the date is 10/20. Life is just ticking by, and you get the sense that it's been ticking by in real time for him, that his life has become such a routine with his wife, with his kid, with the making of the breakfast, that all the days are just blending together. I mean, by the time the breakfast scene ends, it's November 2nd. In the next scene, you see him at the doctor's office, and in the corner of the frame, you can see that we're now in March, which Charlie Kaufman is playing with it by having Caden Cotard tell the doctor that he's so grateful he could see him straight away. And then we just get the sense straight off that there's no way we can trust even time in this universe. He is at the dentist in another scene, and the dentist tells him to come back in 3 months, and the film immediately cuts back to him back at the dentist chair. After his wife leaves him to go to Germany to become an artist, he is with Hazel, who tells him that he needs to get over this, that it's been a year since his wife left him.
She left. It's been a year.
It's been a week.
I'm gonna buy you a calendar.
And he says, no, it's only been a week. And you're not even sure which one of the two of them to believe until you realize that in this pace, it has been a year, but to him it feels like a week. And so it's almost saying that time is completely relative. And what I like about the time sequence, especially in the breakfast scene, is that you get the sense of why Catherine Keener, his wife's character, might be frustrated with him, because he's not even focused in the moment with them. He's staring at the paper and he's only talking about death, and he's only talking about himself falling apart.
Harold Pinter died. God, remember the production of The Dumbwaiter I did at Albany Fest? They found avian flu in Turkey. The first black graduate of the University of Alabama died.
So even though this film is only from his point of view, and you don't really, you're meant to think that she's the villain for leaving, I think in this scene you get a sense of how long she's been ignored by him, which is important, I think, to underpin their entire relationship. Cotard is actually the name of a very, very rare disease that was first written about in 1880, and it is the delusion that you are already dead. There are some cases when this was first diagnosed of people who were so convinced that they were already dead that they stopped eating, that they stopped paying attention to the world around them, and that when something bad would happen, they reacted like it didn't even matter. They were just living in this different plane because they had given up on existence. And it's also crossbred pretty frequently with depression, which I think you see so much in his character. You hear this in Caden, like he's so focused on his own diseases, on watching his body fall apart, that he's acting like he's already dead before he's even dead. And I think one of the ironies of the film is that he's so obsessed with himself falling apart, but his obsession starts when he's healthy. And then by the time he's old and actually falling apart, it's just become a fact, and he's no longer even dwelling on it. It's like he's been living in this future his entire life, and then when the future comes, it's not even as bad, or he doesn't even think it's as bad as he thought it was when he was healthy.
I think the movie really starts to make its point when Caden receives a MacArthur Genius Award and starts to build this massive play, which becomes more and more expansive and becomes ultimately unmanageable. Roger Ebert has speculated that what Charlie Kaufman was trying to do with this play within the movie was to convey how it is we think about people, how it is we compartmentalize people. And I really like that idea that Kaufman is trying to convey. I mean, he talks about in the intro for his script for this film how it's so difficult to let people into your mind in their fullness, right? When we think of people that we meet at work, we capture only but a sliver of other people's existences. And we see only glimpses of what their full lives are. And for us, we're the main star in the play of our lives, and they are but bit players, right? And there's scenes in the movie of Caden trying to come to terms with the expansiveness of the universe he's created by writing little notes for people, by giving them directions. And it doesn't really work too well. And I think it's a commentary on how we try to put people in little boxes. We try to put them in these little compartments in our minds. But ultimately, like, people's lives are too full, and they can't be contained that way. And I think this movie was trying to grapple with that tension.
I don't feel like Synecdoche, New York sees identities as so boxed in. To me, I think it's opening up the door for a lot of just philosophical questions. Like when he casts Diane Wiest, who's playing an actress herself named Millicent Weems, it's like actress on actress. He casts her to play a maid called Ellen Bascombe. And he's not even interested in, is she a good actress? He's interested in, can she clean and is she good at cleaning? And she tries to reach on what she knows.
I played Edgar, the cleaning lady, and Hedda Gabler at the roundabout.
Great.
And so he casts her in the part. But what I find really amusing is that if she's an actress playing a maid, but all she does all day is clean an apartment, is she an actress or is she a maid? And I think that's the questions that we should be asking here.
The blurring of the line between the roles that we play and who we really are. But I think that actually goes towards, this idea of how we compartmentalize things, that like we play different roles for different people. You're someone to your lover, you're someone to your parent, and you're someone to your people at work. We play these different roles, and can we separate playing a role versus being the person?
Try to keep in mind that a young person playing Willy Loman thinks he's only pretending to be at the end of a life full of despair. But the tragedy is that we know that you, the young actor, will end up in this very place of desolation.
Okay.
And I think certainly towards the end of the movie, as you have that character, Millicent Weems, playing Caden, giving Caden, like real Caden, orders, it really does blur that line. It's like, okay, I have a version of myself giving me orders, but which one is really me? And I think the movie plays around with, like, who is truly myself? What is the true self? What does self even mean? And that's what part of why I like the movie.
Wrap some around your hands. Wipe yourself. There was supposed to be something else.
Violet's tattoos are, I think, at once both just a fanciful creation that Charlie Kaufman put in there to play around with, and then also mildly symbolic. I mean, we have to think about the fact that these tattoos were done to Violet when she was 10 years old by Maria, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, the woman who will eventually grow up to be her lover, which is one of the creepier elements of the film, even though she's known her since she was a baby, since Maria is her mother's best friend. I'm not sure how much we should read into this, but if we did read into this, the thing that I think is important is that Maria, we also learn, has sort of poisoned Violet, not only through these tattoos, which are poison and which are killing her because they're dying, but by permanently putting in all these ideas in her head about who her father was and why her father left her. She convinces Violet that Caden left the family because he wanted to take up a gay lover named Eric. And it's a false truth that Violet just can't get rid of. Like, nothing that's been done to her body and her brain by Maria can ever be undone, no matter what Caden says. Her deathbed scene, I think, is probably one of the toughest in the film because she asks Caden to apologize for things that he didn't do. And he knows he didn't do them, but because he loves his daughter, he apologizes anyways, and she still can't forgive him. And it's almost like nothing you do in this life ever matters. It's a very, very bleak moment.
No.
Oh.
The House on Fire is funny because before the film came out, a journalist asked Charlie Kaufman, please, for the love of God, explain The House on Fire. And Charlie Kaufman just said, who cares? I think when The House on Fire appears in the film, it's the first real moment that says to the audience, you know, from here on out, all logical bets are off. We're going to do whatever we want. And you have to either decide at this moment to embrace Synecdoche, New York for what it wants to show you, or you can resist it. And at that point, it's just going to be a completely frustrating film. I'm tempted just to buy it, just to think about The House on Fire as Charlie Kaufman's just weird, fun meta joke. Like, take this or leave it. But at the same time, there's some interesting things happening in the scene. Hazel buys the house on fire, knowing it's on fire, saying to her real estate agent that she's really just worried she's going to die in the fire. And all her real estate agent can say in return is, it's a big decision how one prefers to die. And the house on fire is what actually ends up killing her. She dies of smoke inhalation of it many, many decades later. And it's almost like in this scene, you have Hazel just sort of embracing the future of her own death, almost like she's been given a diagnosis of cancer and she's just decided to take it. And it sounds negative, but at the same time, there's something in here that's sort of lovely, which is that instead of running away from it, instead of worrying about it, she moves in, she makes it a home, she makes the time count. And it almost ends up giving her a second act in her life, because when she buys the house, she says to the real estate agent that she never thought she'd be buying a house alone, but that's what she's doing. She's sort of giving up on one life that she thought she had, which was maybe future marriage, husband, kids, and here she is 36 and she's just going to buy this home and make her own life. And it ends up giving her second life. There's a man living in the basement who winds up being her husband and winds up fathering her children. And it's almost like instead of Caden worrying about death and fighting it all the time, she just sort of looked at what it was and saw what this house, her future death, would give her.
I think the scene is definitely goofy. I think it's intended to elicit a laugh, but I also think that Kaufman was clearly trying to convey something with it. At the end of the movie, there's this line she says,
The end is built into the beginning. What can you do?
God, you're just perfect.
And I think what he's trying to say is that we make decisions all the time, big monumental decisions that are going to affect how we live and how we die. And to your point, we can either accept this fact, we can either move on and live life, or we can let it overwhelm us. And in the movie, you see Hazel accepting it and moving on. But when we buy a house, oftentimes we're buying the house we're going to die in, essentially, is I think what the movie's trying to say. When we move to a city, we're moving to a city we might die in. I think he's just trying to say the end is built into the beginning, that the end of life is built into the decisions we're making every single day. A house on fire is a way to communicate that. This is part 1 of a 2-part video essay on Synecdoche, New York. If you want to see part 2, subscribe to this channel.